Please don't come. Your brother wants a drama-free wedding. That was the text Adele Lane received in the middle of an ordinary workday in Portland between budget spreadsheets and client emails. A minute later, another message followed from her brother himself. Just send a gift. At first, she thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The cruel twist she had paid for almost everything. So, what happens when you're excluded from something you built with your own hands and your own money? And what does silence really mean when it replaces belonging? For a long time after those messages, I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't even call anyone. I opened my laptop. The folder was exactly where I'd left it. Ethan and Claire wedding budget. Clean, organized, responsible. The kind of folder you'd expect from someone who handles timelines and invoices for a living. I clicked it open, half expecting to find some detail I'd imagined. Some shared expense, some contribution I'd forgotten. Instead, I found a number. $38,412. I stared at it for a while, like maybe it would blink first. It didn't. Every cent had come from my account. Not a shared family pool, not a temporary loan. Mine. I started scrolling. Venue deposit approved and transferred. My initials beside the line item. Catering paid in 2 installments. My credit card on file. Floral design secured. My signature at the bottom of the contract in neat, careful script. Live band contact email listed as mine. Looked less like a family effort and more looked less like a family effort and more like a private investment portfolio. Only this wasn't stocks or property. It was centerpieces, hors d'oeuvres, a dance floor I wasn't allowed to stand on. I remembered the way Mom used to say, "You're the reason this family works." She said it when I wired the first deposit for the venue because Ethan had forgotten. She said it when I spent an entire Sunday comparing catering menus so Claire wouldn't feel overwhelmed. She said it with pride, like I was the glue holding everything together. Back then, I thought it meant I mattered. Now I understood it meant I was useful. I leaned closer to the screen, reading through contracts I'd skimmed months earlier with excitement. I had been careful, so careful, checking cancellation clauses, confirming headcounts, negotiating small discounts like it was my own event. I had treated every payment like an act of love, not a transaction. And somehow in the middle of all that effort, I had disappeared. I began opening the PDFs one by one, slower this time. The venue contract bore my signature in black ink. The catering agreement listed my card details. The florist's invoice had my initials in blue next to approved. Even the band's contract referred to me as the primary contact. Primary contact, not sister of the groom, not guest, not family. Contact. The irony settled in sharp and quiet. I wasn't part of the wedding. I was managing it, financing it, quietly underwriting a celebration I had just been uninvited from. I pressed print. The machine hummed to life, mechanical and indifferent. The first contract slid out warm at the edges, then another and another. Each page landed on my desk with a soft final sound, paper against wood, evidence accumulating. I didn't rush it. I let each sheet come out slowly, watching as the stack grew thicker. Venue, catering, florist, band, photographer, equipment rentals, transportation. It felt like I was building a case file instead of a wedding. When the last page printed, I gathered them into a neat pile and spread them across the table. They covered the surface almost entirely. White sheets, marked with dates and dollar amounts, my name repeating at the bottom of each one like a quiet confession. $38,412. It wasn't just the amount, it was the pattern. Every time something had gone wrong, I had fixed it. Every time someone hesitated, I stepped in. I had believed I was supporting my brother, helping him start his life, being the dependable one, the steady one. Now I saw something else. I had funded a performance, and when the curtain was ready to rise, they told me not to come backstage. I caught my reflection in the dark window across the room. The city outside kept moving cars, passing lights flickering, but I felt strangely still. The rain distorted my face in the glass, blurring the edges. I looked tired, not heartbroken, not furious, just tired, invisible. Ethan had laughed over dinner a month earlier and said, "You're practically part of the wedding team." I'd smiled at the time, thinking it meant inclusion, belonging. Now it felt literal. I was the team, the unpaid coordinator, the accountant of their happiness, not the sister. I picked up one of the contracts and felt its weight in my hands. It surprised me. Paper isn't supposed to feel heavy, but stacked together like that, it carried something solid. Proof, responsibility. Years of saying yes without ever asking what it cost me. Each page was a reminder of trust, misplaced, of how easily generosity can turn into expectation, of how silence can be mistaken for consent. They wanted a drama-free wedding. I sat back down and looked at the pile again, really looked at it this time. The numbers no longer felt abstract, they felt deliberate, intentional. I had approved every single one. No one had forced me, but no one had stopped me either. That realization didn't sting the way I expected. It settled instead, calm, clear. This wasn't about anger, not yet. It was about clarity. For months, I thought I was building something with them. A memory, a celebration, a shared moment. Instead, I had been constructing an illusion, one where my value was measured in transfers and confirmations. And when my presence threatened their version of peace, I was the easiest thing to remove. I gathered the contracts back into a single stack and tapped the edges against the table to straighten them. The sound was small but precise. Order restored. If they wanted a drama-free wedding, fine. They would have one. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for an invitation. I wasn't even going to explain how absurd it was to uninvite the person paying the bills. I simply sat there, surrounded by the receipts of a family that didn't see me, and felt something shift. The disbelief drained away first, then the hurt. What replaced it wasn't loud, it wasn't fiery, it was quiet. And in that quiet, for the first time since the messages arrived, I felt steady. They had asked for peace, and suddenly I understood exactly what that could mean. 2 weeks before the wedding, I began, not with shouting, not with a dramatic announcement, just a quiet shift. I told myself it wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud. Revenge wants to be seen. What I wanted was something else, entirely a pause, a deliberate stillness. If they didn't want my presence, then they wouldn't have my momentum either. I started with the venue. Patricia answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. For months, she'd spoken to me like we were co-conspirators building something elegant together. We had discussed table layouts, lighting tones, backup plans in case of rain. She trusted me. I had earned that trust by being precise. "Hi, Patricia, it's Adele Lane." "Adele." I was just reviewing the final seating chart. Of course she was. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. I kept my tone even. Professional. I need to place a brief hold on the remaining payment schedule. Just a minor administrative review. There was a pause on her end. Not alarmed, just confused. A hold. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, I said smoothly. Just aligning some internal details. She hesitated. Should I confirm with your mother? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. That question told me everything. In their minds, I was still the gatekeeper. Not yet, I replied softly. I'll let you know if that's necessary. The silence stretched for a second, then she agreed. All right, I'll mark it as pending. Pending. That was the word I wanted. Not canceled, not withdrawn, just suspended in midair, waiting for my signal. When the call ended, I sat still for a moment. My pulse wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. It felt strangely routine, like adjusting a project timeline at work. A small shift with large consequences. Next was the catering company. Alan answered with the kind of cheerful efficiency you hear in people who have memorized every dish on their menu. Miss Lane, we're finalizing the tasting notes for Saturday. I could almost picture the plated samples, the polished silver lids. I had chosen each dish carefully. I knew the sauces, the garnish, the exact shade of linen they'd use beneath the plates. I need to pause the final installment, I said. Another pause. Yes, just temporarily. We're reviewing some budget allocations. Is something wrong with the menu? Not at all. Everything's perfect. That seemed to reassure him. Vendors understand budgets. They understand timing. They don't ask many questions if your tone is steady enough. All right, he said slowly. I'll flag it and hold the order until we receive confirmation. Thank you, I replied. Confirmation? It was interesting how easily systems obeyed when you were listed as the responsible party. The florist came next. She had been the most enthusiastic of all of them, sending me photos of peonies and roses with exclamation marks in every email. Claire had wanted something soft and romantic. I had spent hours comparing arrangements, calculating seasonal pricing, negotiating delivery fees. I just need to freeze the remaining payment, I told her. For now. Oh, she said, confusion blooming in her voice. But the flowers have already been ordered. I understand. This is only administrative. The word felt clinical, detached. I leaned into that tone, letting it carry the conversation. Well, we'll need confirmation soon, she said carefully. You'll have it, I answered, but not today. Then the band. They were the easiest. Musicians are used to shifting schedules. We're placing a temporary hold on the final transfer, I explained. Nothing permanent. Got it, the lead singer replied. Just let us know. Just let us know. Every call followed the same pattern. Calm request, brief confusion, professional compliance, no raised voices, no accusations. I wasn't burning bridges. I was closing valves. By the time I reached the photographer, the rhythm of it had settled into something almost meditative. Please suspend any pending auto payments until further notice, I said. And he responded with a polite acknowledgement. 4 major vendors, 5 if you counted the coordinator. All paused, not canceled. That distinction mattered to me. Canceling would create noise, emails, alerts, phone calls flying across the family group chat. It would be obvious. Pausing was silent. Pausing meant the machine kept humming, unaware that the fuel had been removed. When the last call ended, I opened the shared account. The balance sat there, clean and unquestioning. The remainder of the wedding fund money that had once felt like love in numeric form waited for its final destination. I transferred it into a new account under my name alone. Temporary holding, I labeled it. Personal audit. The phrasing was deliberate. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't taking something that didn't belong to me. I was reclaiming what had always been mine, what had simply been framed as generosity for so long that no one questioned it. The confirmation screen blinked, then settled. Transfer complete. It felt less dramatic than I expected. No thunderclap, no cinematic swell of music, just a quiet shift in ownership. That night I took out a small ledger I hadn't used in years. The paper was cream-colored, the lines faint but steady. I wrote down each vendor's name. Date contacted, status payment paused, venue pending, catering on hold, florist frozen, band suspended, photographer paused. I added a note beside each entry, no payment beyond today. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost elegant. The act of writing grounded me. Each stroke of the pen turned emotion into structure. This wasn't chaos, it was accounting. My phone buzzed as I closed the ledger. Ethan. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I opened the message. Do you remember the final menu choices? I stared at the words. There was no hesitation in them, no awareness. He was still assuming I was there, still managing, still coordinating, still smoothing over details. You'll find out soon enough, I typed back. It wasn't sarcasm, it wasn't anger, it was a fact waiting to arrive. After I sent it, I leaned back in my chair and listened to the quiet hum of my apartment. The rain tapped against the windows again, steady and unbothered. For years, I had believed love meant giving, without limits. That the more invisible your effort, the purer it was. Mom used to say that love isn't about recognition, it's about sacrifice. But sacrifice without acknowledgement turns into something else. Permission. Permission for people to forget you exist as long as your contribution continues. As the days passed, I monitored everything the way I would any project. Emails from Claire filled my inbox color palette updates, last-minute guest list adjustments, cheerful exclamation marks thanking me for handling everything. I replied politely, attached previously approved files, withheld nothing that had already been paid for, but I authorized nothing new. The night before the final installments were due, I reviewed every contract again. Every auto payment had been disabled. Every vendor marked as awaiting confirmation. The entire event rested on a simple truth. Nothing moved without my approval, and I had withdrawn it. I sat there for a long time, watching the cursor blink on my screen like a quiet heartbeat. There was no thrill in it, no rush, just calm. They wanted a wedding without me. All I had done was make sure that absence had weight. A week later, I met Marin at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where the windows fog up when it rains, and the tables wobble just slightly if you lean too hard on them. She had known me since college. She knew the version of me that stayed up too late finishing other people's projects. The version that said yes before thinking. The version that never wanted to be difficult. The moment I sat down, she looked at my face instead of the menu. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. There was no accusation in her voice, just care. The kind that doesn't try to control you. I stirred sugar into my coffee even though I usually take it black. I watched the granules disappear without protest. They wanted peace, I said. I'm giving them exactly that. Marin studied me for a long moment. You're not doing this out of spite. I shook my head. No. I let the words settle between us. I'm just done pretending that money can replace respect. The cafe hummed around us. Milk steaming low, conversations blending together, rain tapping against the glass like a soft metronome. For a second, neither of us spoke. She leaned back in her chair. Maybe don't react, she said carefully. Let your actions speak for you. I almost smiled. I'm not reacting. I'm setting a boundary. Saying it out loud felt unfamiliar. The word boundary didn't roll easily off my tongue. It felt heavier than anger, more permanent. Marin reached across the table and touched my wrist. Boundaries are fine, she said gently, but sometimes they cut deeper than you think. I looked past her, watching condensation trail down the window in uneven lines. They used to say I was part of everything, I murmured. Every family event, every emergency, every plan. I paused, but it was never about inclusion. It was about convenience. I made things work. That's all they saw. Marin didn't interrupt. She never did when it mattered. Families can love you and still use you, she said finally. It's a hard truth. I nodded slowly. Hearing it from someone else made it feel less like betrayal and more like reality. This time I said I'm not paying for their comfort. Not emotionally, not financially. She watched me closely, admiration flickering behind the worry in her eyes. You won't tell them in advance. No warning. I shook my head again. I've spent my whole life giving them chances to notice. They never did. They only see value when it benefits them. So they'll find out the way I found out. By surprise, she said. Yes, she gave a faint smile. That's cold. It's precise, I corrected softly. It's fair. The server came by to refill our cups, breaking the tension for a moment. The smell of roasted beans rose between us, grounding everything back into something ordinary. When he left, Maureen rested her chin on her hand. Do you ever wonder if they'll understand why? I considered that. Understanding isn't required, I said. Just consequence. The words didn't feel cruel. They felt measured, like I had weighed them carefully before letting them exist. We sat there in a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when someone isn't trying to fix you. Outside, traffic moved in slow streaks through the rain. Inside, the world felt contained, manageable. I'm not angry anymore, I admitted after a while. That's the strange part. I thought I would be. But I'm not. What are you? She asked. Clear. The answer surprised even me. For years I had confused generosity with obligation. I had believed that if I just gave enough time, money, effort, they would see me, choose me, include me without conditions. But being needed isn't the same as being valued. Marin squeezed my wrist lightly before pulling her hand back. Silence is sometimes the loudest protest, she said. I met her gaze and nodded. She was right. There was no need for dramatic confrontations or long explanations. No need to rehearse speeches in the mirror. If my presence had been inconvenient, then my absence would be undeniable. As we stood to leave, she slipped on her coat and glanced at me one more time. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't lose yourself in the quiet. I thought about that as we stepped out into the rain, the cold air sharper than it had been all morning. I won't, I said, and for the first time in a long while I believed it. 4 days before the wedding, I opened my banking app out of habit, not suspicion. Morning light slipped through the blinds, cutting pale lines across the floor. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. All the major payments had been paused. Everything was still just the way I had left it. Then I saw it. One of the sub-accounts showed a new transaction, $2,000 transferred out. The memo line read neatly, "For florist." The sender wasn't a vendor. It was my mother, Linda. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen, not at the amount. 2,000 wasn't the point. It was the assumption behind it. The quiet confidence that she could still reach into my account, still move money without asking, because she always had. In our family, financial control had never required permission. It was disguised as contribution, as teamwork, as we're all in this together. But somehow the access only flowed one way. I didn't call her. I didn't text. Confrontation would have created noise, and noise wasn't what I was after. Instead, I opened the settings menu, Manage Access. Her name appeared under authorized users, sitting there like it belonged. I selected it. My finger hovered for half a second, not out of doubt, just acknowledgement. Then I revoked it. The confirmation prompt asked if I was sure. I read the question carefully, as if it were more symbolic than digital. Yes, access removed. Next, I changed the password. Something long, unfamiliar, not tied to birthdays or family history. I updated the recovery email. Then, I enabled two-step verification, an extra layer she wouldn't even know existed. When the confirmation email arrived in my inbox, I read it twice. All shared authorizations have been successfully revoked. It didn't feel like slamming a door. It felt like finally locking one that had been wide open for years. That afternoon, I turned to my laptop and drafted a series of emails. The first went to the wedding vendors. Subject line, payment status update. I kept the tone clean, professional, effective. Immediately, please consider our previous agreements inactive until further confirmation from me. No accusations, no explanations. Just a clear boundary in formal language. I sent it to the venue, the catering company, the florist, the band, the photographer. Then I copied a variation of the same message to the event coordination company. At the end, I added one more line. Please remove all stored payment details associated with my account. That sentence felt important. Not just pause the flow of money, erase the imprint. Replies began to trickle in. Automated acknowledgements first. Then short responses from actual staff members. Understood. Will await further instruction. Payment details removed as requested. Some sounded confused. Others indifferent. None of them asked the questions my family never did. By early evening, everything was clean. No saved cards, no pending transfers, no invisible threads connecting me to a celebration I wasn't welcome at. Around 7, my phone buzzed. Ethan. I opened the message without emotion. Thank you for being understanding. I read it once, then again. There was no mention of the payments, no hint that anything had shifted. No awareness that the foundation of his wedding had quietly disappeared beneath his feet. Just gratitude, casual and detached. The words glowed on my screen like an afterthought. I didn't reply. I let the screen dim in my hand before locking the phone and placing it face down on the table. Dinner that night tasted like nothing. The city outside moved as it always did, cars passing, distant laughter drifting up from the street, life continuing unaware. Afterward, I opened the drawer beside my desk. The wedding invitation lay inside, still pristine in its cream envelope edged with gold. I slid it out carefully, smoothing it flat on the table. Together with their families, it read. The phrase felt almost ironic now, as if the paper itself were insisting on unity where there had been none. I traced my thumb over the embossed letters, feeling the raised texture beneath my skin. For months, that invitation had represented celebration, belonging, a role. Now it was just paper. I placed it in the center of the desk and looked at it for a long moment. "This is my RSVP," I whispered. The words weren't sharp. They weren't bitter. They were steady. There was no anger left in me. Just a calm certainty that I had already answered in the only language they had ever truly understood. Not with shouting, not with accusations, but by reclaiming what was mine and letting the silence speak for itself. It rained the morning of the wedding. Portland rain, not dramatic, not theatrical, just steady gray and patient. The kind that softened the edges of buildings and made the world quieter than usual. I woke before my alarm. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the soft percussion of water against the windows. The date felt heavy in the room. Not sharp, not painful, just present. Today, across the country, they would be steaming dresses, arranging chairs, pinning boutonnieres. Somewhere, someone would be checking a timeline. I made coffee. The apartment smelled like dark roast and clean linen. No music, no rush. My phone sat face down on the counter, silent. It began around 9. The first vibration was tentative. A single buzz against the wood, then another, then 3 in quick succession. I didn't reach for it immediately. I poured my coffee, added a splash of milk, took it to the small table by the window, sat down. The rain traced slow paths down the glass. The phone vibrated again and again. Finally, I turned it over. 6 missed calls. 2 from my mother, 3 from Ethan, 1 from an unknown number with the venue's area code. I opened the messages. "Where is the caterer? Patricia says there's no payment on file. The florist says the account was suspended. Adele, call me, now." The words were frantic, even through text. Short, clipped, no punctuation where there should have been. I could almost hear the rising pitch in their voices. Another message appeared while I watched. The band didn't show up. They said they never received a deposit. I imagined the venue. Guests arriving in muted pastels and dark suits. Umbrellas shaking off rain at the entrance. The lobby buzzing with polite confusion. Staff whispering. Behind the check-in desk, Patricia flipping through folders, her professional composure thinning. In the reception hall, round tables would sit bare. No centerpieces, no soft white arrangements spilling over glass vases. Just empty surfaces under rented chandeliers. In the kitchen, stainless steel counters would gleam untouched. No trays warming, no plated salmon, no careful choreography of servers. Somewhere my mother would be demanding answers. Somewhere Ethan would be pacing. The phone rang. His name filled the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" Silence on the other end, sharp breathing charged. "What did you do?" Ethan's voice was tight, stripped of its usual polish. I kept my gaze on the rain. "I paused the payments," I said. He stopped himself. "They're saying nothing was confirmed. The venue, the caterer, everyone says there's no money. Today is the wedding." I imagined him standing in a hallway, one hand pressed to his forehead, tie already loosened. "You told me you wanted peace," I replied. "This isn't peace, Adele. This is sabotage." The word hung there. I took a slow breath. not to steady myself. I already was. You asked me to step back, I said, to stop making things complicated, to let the family handle it. That's not what I meant, but it's what you said. In the distance through the phone, I could hear muffled voices. Someone calling his name. The rising hum of panic, trying to stay contained. You could have just talked to me, he said softer now. Not angry, bewildered. I did, I answered. For months. Rain slid down the window in a thin silver line. You wanted quiet, I said. You've got it. There was nothing triumphant in my tone. No sharp edge, just fact. On the other end, he exhaled. The sound of someone realizing too late that silence can be heavier than shouting. You're really not coming, he said. It wasn't a question. No, another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. People are here. I know. The rain kept falling. After we hung up, I placed the phone back on the table. It vibrated twice more before going still. I didn't check. Instead, I watched the street below. A woman hurried past with a red umbrella. A dog pulled its owner toward a puddle. A bus hissed to a stop. Life uncomplicated. I pictured the reception hall again, guests whispering, staff scrambling, timelines dissolving. Not as spectacle, not with satisfaction, just as consequence. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't exposed secrets. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply stepped away and taken my silence with me. And in that absence, everything that had been resting on me without acknowledgement finally had to stand on its own. The rain didn't stop all morning. It didn't need to. They arrived just after dusk. The rain had thinned to a mist clinging to the street lights in a soft halo. I heard their car door slam before the knock came sharp, urgent, familiar. I opened the door before Linda could knock again. She stood rigid on the threshold, coat still, damp eyes, bright with something sharper than anger. Humiliation has a particular posture. It straightens the spine. Do you have any idea what you've done? She demanded, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. Robert followed more slowly, closing the door behind him with care as if gentleness could soften the air between us. I didn't raise my voice. I withdrew my name from the bill. Linda let out a short, incredulous laugh. You humiliated us in front of everyone. The word us landed heavily. I folded my arms, not defensively, simply to steady my hands. I paused payments weeks ago. I notified the vendors. I removed my accounts. There was nothing sudden about it. You knew what would happen, she shot back. You knew this would fall apart. I knew I was no longer paying for something I wasn't included in. Robert stepped between us slightly, palms open. Let's all just take a breath. Linda turned to him. She embarrassed her own family. I held her gaze. You asked me to step back. That didn't mean disappear. It meant exactly that. Silence pressed in around us. The apartment felt smaller with them inside it. Linda's voice shifted, less fury, now more disbelief. Families don't do this to each other. Families also don't use each other, I replied evenly. Robert winced at the word. Use. Adele, he said gently, this could have been handled differently. How, I asked. By continuing to fund something I had no say in. By pretending I wasn't being divided out of my own life. Linda's expression hardened. This was cruelty. I shook my head. Cruelty is loud. Cruelty makes a spectacle. I didn't shout. I didn't expose anyone. I removed myself. You let us walk into a disaster. I let you walk into independence. The sentence hung there. Robert rubbed his temples. This isn't about independence. It's about timing. It's always about timing when the person setting boundaries is inconvenient, I said. Linda's hands trembled not from weakness, but from restrained emotion. You could have at least told us. I did, I answered quietly. Every time I said, I felt sidelined. Every time I asked to be included. Every time I was told to keep the peace. At that, something flickered in Robert's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or regret. Linda looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time. My furniture, my books, the life I had built here without them. You've changed, she said. No, I replied. I've separated. The distinction mattered. Robert exhaled slowly. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said. That's the point. The room fell still again. Outside, a car passed tires hissing against wet pavement. Linda's shoulders lowered a fraction. The anger didn't disappear, but it settled into something colder. You've made your position very clear. I needed to. She turned toward the door. Robert lingered a second longer, his eyes searching my face as if hoping to find some crack in my composure. There has to be a way back from this, he said softly. There is, I answered, but it won't look the way it used to. He nodded once, though I wasn't sure he understood. When they stepped into the hallway I didn't follow, I waited until the elevator doors slid closed at the end of the corridor. Then I shut my own door. The click of the lock was quiet, precise, not an act of anger. Just a boundary finally sealed. 3 months later, I left Portland. There was no dramatic reason for the move. No rupture that forced it. Just a lease ending a job opportunity, transferring north, and the quiet understanding that some cities hold too many echoes. Seattle felt different the moment I arrived. Wider streets, salt in the air, ferries, cutting deliberate paths across gray water. I rented a small apartment overlooking a hill lined with maple trees. The boxes were lighter than I expected. Or maybe I was. I unpacked slowly. Books first, then the dishes, the framed photograph of the coastline I'd taken years ago. I didn't rush to make it feel like home. I let it become one. Ethan's email came 2 weeks after the move. The subject line was simple, I'm sorry. It wasn't long. He wrote that the day had spiraled, that guests had left early, that some vendors had refused last-minute payment. He said he hadn't realized how much had been resting on me until it wasn't there. I should have handled it differently, he wrote. I should have handled you differently. There was no request attached, no plea to fix anything. Just a recognition that arrived late but intact. I read it once, then I archived it, not out of bitterness, just because I didn't need to carry it. Marin texted me the same evening. Do you feel lighter? I stood by the kitchen window looking out at a sky the color of pewter. I considered the question carefully. Not lighter exactly. Lighter implies something was dropped, something dramatic and visible. What I felt was steadier, as if the ground beneath me had stopped shifting. I typed back, I feel quieter. She responded with a single heart. News traveled in small ways, through distant relatives, through social media posts that disappeared as quickly as they went up. Claire's name circulated in conversations about miscommunication and financial confusion. Linda, who had always prided herself on seamless events and social precision, found herself explaining what had happened more than once. The explanations grew shorter each time. Reputation doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes in glances, in withheld invitations, in questions that linger a second too long. I didn't comment. I didn't correct. Their fallout wasn't mine to manage. One evening, after the last box was emptied, I sat at the small desk in my new bedroom and opened a fresh journal. The page was clean, unmarked. For a long time, I just listened to the faint hum of traffic below, to the steady rhythm of my own breathing. Then I wrote, "Peace doesn't always look like forgiveness." I paused, considering. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes silence isn't revenge, it's clarity. It's the moment you realize choosing yourself doesn't require hating anyone else. It only requires honesty. If you've ever stepped back from family to protect your peace, you know how heavy and necessary that can feel. Maybe peace for you looks different. I'd love to hear what it means in your life. If this story resonated, stay with us. There's more to explore together.